Well, Tej, I thought CM Punk had a lot in this war of words with Seth that he had not um, counterpunched with yet. And tonight, he counterpunched. I thought it was just a knockout for CM Punk on the microphone. I thought this was CM Punk's best promo since he came back. It's, Punk is Punk. I mean, there's a certain level he just sort of hits. Every once in a while, it felt like, especially during Drew, sometimes Drew was getting better zingers in on him than he was getting in on Drew. A couple times where it felt like the little pandering, it's great to be alive in this city, and it's sort of like the Mick Foley cheap heat. So, I mean, when I say Punk's at a certain level, even when I think he's off a little cliched, or pandering or meandering and doesn't have the material to work with, it's still Punk. But this was vintage top shelf Punk. We can go over it, but I just thought Seth was knocked out, lost all his teeth, and was just splayed on the mat verbally and had almost nothing left when Punk was done with him. Is that how you saw it?
I mean, I definitely agree with you. It was one of Punk's best performances on the mic since he's been back. And I think a lot of that has to do with Punk always does his best when he's kind of backed into a corner emotionally, and all he has left is his resolve, and he has to fight his way back out, essentially, on the mic. And that's kind of where he was today. And that's why, it was a little bit harder to buy into Punk as an underdog against Drew, because he had so much more experience, and he was in the wrong at certain points, but here you could really feel where Seth was coming from, which gave Punk the secret sauce to really kind of fire back. I definitely agree. I think Seth brought it. I am very much in the camp that Seth did not come out weaker, but I think Punk took it home at the end of the day. I think that it set up Punk to really lay the groundwork for an incredible moment at Raw on Netflix, the premiere. Yeah. I think that character-wise, he is the strongest as an underdog he's been since returning to WWE, and he lit the crowd on fire. He lit me on fire emotionally. Mm-hmm. I walked away absolutely buzzing. I was in my seat just vibrating, and it I watch a lot of wrestling. There's not a lot that can actively make me feel like that right now, and this really got me. Absolute A-tier, top tier work from both men.
And here's the thing. I think Seth did the best with the material that he had. This was not like, Seth phoned it in, or Seth didn't bring his A game. He did. I just think in this argument, when you know the history, Punk walked away, and Punk isn't playing the sympathy card if I was mentally and physically beat down, and it. And I don't know that I'd be here standing today if I had tried to soldier on. That's not a good argument for Punk to make, and he's avoiding that, even though that's part of the truth. But when Punk said, I loved where I worked, but I hated the man in charge, and we each made our choice. He conceded. He didn't bury Seth for staying. Seth's burying him for leaving. Anybody who knows that situation knows Punk had to leave for just stay alive. I mean, he was physically and mentally. No one should have ever held that against him. I strongly disagreed with Jim Ross, and I was very vocal about it when he said, Punk's going to regret this. He left money on the table. What good is having money when you're dead? And I don't use that lightly. I watched way too many wrestlers burn out and die. And Punk handled it in his own way, which was not taking a bunch of drugs. But he worked till he couldn't work anymore. And I'm hardly 100% Punk rah when it comes to a lot of the things. If you've heard me comment on them in the last few years, I think I'm real even-handed. That's what I try to be. It's my point of view. People have different points of view, but I'm hardly an apologist for Punk in any way. But when it comes to that situation, it's totally right to walk away. And Seth, but the part with Seth, and it's hard for Seth to play this card, is, well, you didn't communicate with me after you left. And I thought we were friends, but that can start sounding a little, junior high clicky, you didn't return my text fast enough, and you went out with some other friends and didn't tell me. It's it can hurt them both. And I think it was smart to stay away from that. But I don't think Seth had a lot to work with beyond, and he could have leaned into this more. He could have said, Punk, when you left, you just said you were angry at the boss. But you didn't return calls of people who you were in the trenches with, who you traveled with, who you worked in the ring with, side by side and opposite, who you drew money with. When you left, you didn't communicate with us. And we still were fighting this battle, and you fought it your way, and I disagree with it. I chose to fight it my way, which was to stay around, and I'll concede I was fresher and younger. And by the way, I still am. You can take a little dig to him on the side going, you'll find that out Monday. But we chose to stay and fight, and you could have stayed quiet. You did what you had to do. But instead, you did try to destroy what we were trying to rebuild. And I think Seth swung and missed on that. I don't think that was there for him. And he didn't say it. He didn't have that counter. That counter was there to be had. So when Punk finally said what he needed to say, which is, I didn't hate this place, I hated the guy I worked with, and didn't bury Seth for staying, because that's dangerous, to say, oh, you should have quit with me. Punk had made a lot of money, and he was physically and mentally burned out in a way Seth wasn't. Teach their own in that situation. I thought Seth had material that he just didn't deliver. Now, maybe that's by design. Maybe he wanted to, and it got vetoed because management goes, no, we need Punk to be over. Those points are too good. I don't think that would have hurt Punk. I mean, this really is two people who are at different places in their careers, physically, mentally. They handled it differently. I think fans can like both. Where I thought Seth lost is what Lady B brought up. Seth doing the you wouldn't know about being a parent line. Wow, they went places. To me, that was Seth saying, I lost. I'm losing, because some people are parents, some people aren't. To play the card of my existence on this planet as a human is superior to yours because I'm a parent and you're not, was a cheap shot. And I think the crowd reaction was, ooh. There's lots of reasons people aren't parents. Some by choice, some not. Some have private things that happen that devastate them where they wanted and almost were parents and couldn't. I mean, you just don't go there. And I just thought, for a lot of people, that's going to disqualify Seth from getting their cheers and their merch and buying his merch for a long time, because that felt like a real cheap shot. So anyway, those are some of my thoughts. That's why, I mean, I know, and I'm like Derek Hubbard said earlier, I threw it up on the screen. That's not Derek. Let me bring him up here. This is Derek Hubbard. He goes, the final promo segment was strong. Who got the better of the verbal sparring had more to do with who you favor. I thought Seth brought it, but I'm team Seth. And I throw that up there because, if you do hold a grudge against Punk, and I don't say that as a loaded statement like, oh, you're holding a grudge and it's unfair. Punk's done plenty for you to go, he's got nothing. I'm not cheering that guy again. I'm admittedly biased, even if he makes better points. I get it. Punk can be, he doesn't let things go. He blows little things out of proportion to, that's part of his history. So I totally get it. But objectively, I really think objectively, this was a knockout for Punk. But I think Seth could have had some comebacks that would have made it a closer score. Tej, respond to any of that.
I think that a lot of Seth's failings, and I use the word failings very, very liberally because I do think this was some of his best work on the mic, came because he was trying to have a rebuttal to some of Punk's points, but they just didn't hit in the same way. The line about, all right, you haven't had a child, it felt like it was a direct response to CM Punk calling out Becky for, not being part of the active roster because she had a child. But, for Punk, that ties into Seth's hypocrisy about taking your bag and going home. Whereas for Seth, it just felt like a loaded shot for his personal life in a way that didn't really hit in 2024 because, well, like you said, there's a lot of very legitimate reasons to not be a parent in this country right now. And very few of them are a moral failing at this point in modern society. So but I'm trying to figure out the best way to put this because I'm also team Seth. I grew up with Seth Rollins on my television more than I did CM Punk in my adolescence when, my love of wrestling was really, really taking off. I can almost forgive some of Seth's, shall we say, less nuanced takes because they felt like someone who was lashing out in desperation and in anger against someone he once considered a friend. In kayfabe, I found it to work in a very severely meta way because we've all had those moments where we've been in arguments and when we're on the losing end, we, make a jab that feels a little bit below the belt. And in our own heads, we can kind of tell, maybe I shouldn't have said that. But it added to the realism of the promo segment in a way that didn't stop me from buying into it. I'll put it that way. I don't think that I'm not trying to say that Seth was digging that deep into his character in the moment, but I did think that, both of them came out on an even playing field. Their characters both feel stronger. I'm really curious to see what the face heel dynamic is going to be going into Raw on Netflix, because they could genuinely go both ways and both performers could play face or heel. And when you do that, you've got a nuanced feud. So I'm very, very excited to see what happens next week.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a great segment. I mean, I wasn't rooting for Punk. I wasn't rooting for Seth. I was rooting for a great segment. I got that. My assessment is I don't think Punk could have done better, although there's some chat room comments and maybe there'll be, there's things I focused on and took from the show. And as we look at reader comments, especially those defending Seth, I don't concede the word, but, incorporate some other things where it's like, okay, maybe Punk looked bad there. That felt like a cheap shot. I can see people looking at things differently. My takeaway was Punk hit the lobs that came over home plate and hit triples and home runs, and Seth hit a few doubles and also swung and missed a few times and just watched a couple pitches go by. So, but that said, like what we're seeing here from you and Derek and others is if you're on Team Seth, Punk was Punk. There were aspects of Punk that I don't know. Like I am always ready to call out Punk if I think he misjudges a situation and can slip up and seem self-righteous or self-important or whatever. And I don't think he really did that tonight. Even like people in the chat, and we'll get to the chat in a minute and expand on this. The Becky Lynch line, we'll get into that. Did that justify the "you're not a parent" line? We'll get into that. Was bringing up Becky appropriate? I argue it was, and it wasn't a cheap shot. I mean, Becky's a grown-up world championship top star. She, you don't have to. It wasn't some non-televised wife who was having some private issues. I mean, she's a very public figure within WWE, so that was good. All right, well, we're gonna just keep talking about this. I mean, other things happened on the show of somewhat import, but this was the killer segment, and so we'll get into that, and also the lack of Vince McMahon in the Raw tribute video. Oh my God, I was like, are they going to open with Rob Bartlett and Vince, or Vince next to Randy Savage, or Vince next to Shawn Michaels in some of those early Raws? No, it was Jim Ross, the voice of AEW, was the first voice you heard in that Raw Best of video, not Vince McMahon's, and then Cole afterwards. There's a lot of subtext there.
That felt like a detriment. Not to mention, I think we saw, the former Edge, Adam Copeland was there. I think Mercedes Moné, I saw a glimpse there. Chris Jericho was there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, WWE's showing we're not scared of our competition. We'll mention them. We'll show people who've gone there. We're putting on a face of not being petty. I'm not saying they're not being petty in other ways. I'm not saying they aren't. I'm just saying public face. We're not scared of AEW. But they don't want to plaster Vince McMahon's voice and face. I mean, we got a little in the Austin Tyson show. We saw him briefly, but man, they cut away quick. All right, let's introduce the show. This is the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show for Monday, December 30th, 2024. I'm Wade Keller, host of the show. If you are used to listening to me, if you're not used to listening to me, this is not what I normally sound like. If you are used to listening to me, you understand why I was off last week. Got a bad cold, had fever, and just had cold, and I couldn't talk. I don't know how long I'll last tonight, but I'm here. I'm excited to be back in the chair talking about this show. But yeah, I have a history of when I get bad colds, I get laryngitis, and it's not good for a podcaster. I go to my son's theater events and I'm wearing a mask when no one else is. And people are like, oh, are you sick? Are you protecting us? I'm like, no, I podcast. And if I get, so of course, when I go to a Timberwolves game, and I wear the mask half the time, but I walk through the concourse without it. And of course, 36 hours later, I'm in the beginning of 10 days in bed. So, well, not quite, maybe 5 or 6, but I'm back. And I feel better than I sound. I'm still not 100%. But vocally, I'm way under 100%. But even just, I don't feel like I'm 100% recovered yet. But I am here. I'm a super trooper. I'm showing up. I made a self-deprecating comment on the fix earlier today with Todd. We finally caught up on some of the fix. And he talked about Excalibur, sounding like me last Wednesday. And he's like, why didn't Excalibur acknowledge he had a hoarse voice? And I was like, well, at least he showed up for work, unlike me. But yeah, I was in no condition, especially on Christmas night. Come on. Anyway, enough about me and my voice. I'm done talking about that. Let's talk about this show and the co-host. Tej Narayanan is with me. He is a PWTorch.com contributor and a co-host on the post shows. And Tej, it is great to have you on tonight. Thanks for joining me.
As always, it is a pleasure to be here talking about the very last Raw on cable TV. If we didn't hear that about 20 million times on tonight's show. As Wade so eloquently said, my name is Tej. I run the SmackDown Feud Tracker column on PWTorch.com. Check us out every single Friday. We update all feuds currently going over on the Blue brand. We do a little fantasy booking, little predictions, and we set you up for that night's episode of Friday Night SmackDown. But today, I'm here with Wade Keller, and we're talking about Monday Night Raw. And as always, I'm very, very excited.
Well, Junaid's ready to throw me under the bus, just like throw me off the bus. He's like, get well soon, Wade. Maybe Tej should take the lead. Junaid, I knew you'd be waiting for me to, first opening you have, you're ready to knock me out of the host chair. But great to have you on, Tej. And as the show continues, my comments make it shorter and my questions might be briefer, and I'll be leaning on you. We'll see how things go. It's more tomorrow that I'm worried about than getting through tonight vocally, if my laryngitis history is any indication. But JC Scooby says, even under the weather, Wade, you're still great. Thank you. Four Eyes Malone says, glad you're getting better, Wade. I got sick a month ago and I still have congestion that won't go away. Some bad stuff going around. All right. So you can email the show. wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. If that's easier for you, if you're watching us live, you can email us. That allows you to write longer questions or rants. We'll check the inbox in a little bit. You can also join us as a live caller. We're anticipating an on-site correspondent tonight, by the way. So we'll keep an eye out for him. And a big crowd in Houston. Houston's a good city for them. And that was a really, really impressive visual when they went to the wide shots. Almost 15,000 tickets distributed tonight. So you can be a caller on the show. If you're a VIP member or Patreon supporter, you'll find the link in my TV report at pwtorchvip.com or on our Patreon page if you're a member. If you don't watch us live on YouTube after Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown, then the email is a really good way to be part of the show. But otherwise, join us in the chat. That's always fun. Live interaction throughout the show. Okay, with that taken care of, let's go back to the chat and let a few comments here springboard into some other discussions. So before I mentioned Four Eyes Malone, he said Seth's vocal tones just always make him seem whiny. I'm a fan of Seth, but when he yells, I can't take him serious enough most of the time. I was thinking that, Tej, during the backstage segment when he was talking with Adam Pearce, and it's like he's doing and he's like clowning around, and I'm like, you're about to go out and make this really serious statement about Punk abandoning the company, abandoning his colleagues, and it is tough. Steve Austin once asked me, what is Seth freaking Rollins? Like, what is a freaking it doesn't mean you have to just everyone's characters be so simple as to boil it down to one sentence or three words, but there should be some notion that fans have. If you ask them, if you're sitting down with a new fan and like, oh, tell me about Otis. And it's like, well, you can talk for a minute about who Otis is, and whatever, pick your almost anybody. With Seth, you're like, well, he ran the Shield and he kind of turned on them, and then the Authority dumped him, and then we were expected to cheer him because he was dumped by the bad guys, and he has kind of this weird raspy voice and weird laugh, and now he's sort of, some flamboyant Elton John, Gorgeous George, Jesse the Body Ventura character trying to add some flair to a character that he never really found a groove for. I mean, he's still that, so it does hurt when it's time to get serious, Tej.
100%. Seth is an anomaly to me in modern WWE because it feels like he's kind of saddled with the baggage of his past gimmicks in a way that other performers aren't, because when he began the visionary persona and he turned heel, the Joker-esque cackling, the much more flamboyant outfits and ring gear, it informed his persona. He had essentially lost it. He had lost all restraint. He had lost all sense of, being an architect. He was reckless. But then when he turned face and he kind of coalesced the architect, the visionary, and even some elements of the Monday Night Messiah, which he referenced in this promo, it felt like a lot of the exuberance and the flamboyance wasn't really informing his character anymore. And for a while, you could kind of rationalize it as, he was changed by his heel persona, that insanity will always stay with him. And there were some references to that in 2023. But at this point, it really does feel like it's saddling him. And that was tying it back to the promo to end the show tonight. That was probably the one element of Punk's verbal argument that didn't really hit for me, is just talking about Seth's dress sense as if that's indicative of his fall from grace. Some of Seth's most prominent work was when he was the Visionary. That didn't really feel like it was a dig at anything in particular beyond just Colby Lopez, the real life performer, making some stupid decisions by continuing to wear such over the top ring gear. I didn't really know what that was trying to get to. But no, I definitely agree. I think that where Seth Rollins, the wrestler, is right now, I think that the exuberance, the ring gear, the Joker-esque cackling, the insane parts of his character, it feels like it's distracting, and that's it. And they haven't gone into why it's still there.
It feels like a wrestler without a gimmick who came up with something, a song and outfits to add a layer of literal color, but figurative color to somebody who just hadn't quite found it. There isn't an origin story for it. The Joker's a really good example. There's, all kinds of other, the John Glasses, they reference that, and he's certainly pulling from some flamboyant dresses over the years. But there isn't anything with Seth at the core that matches his gimmick, or that his gimmick, I don't want to do a deep dive into Seth's shortcomings as a wrestling character, because he's doing fine, but there isn't anything that is being amplified that feels authentic about him with his character. And that's the disconnect. I think that's the main. I think people would be okay with him being a clown if people felt this is amplifying clownish aspects of his personality. He just happens to have kind of a raspy voice. And I used to say back in the day, he came across as the guy who once a year shows up at the DMV in his town, and all the people who work there are like, oh no, not this guy again. And like, that was his heel character, just this annoying, grating guy. And now he just added outfits to it. So, but obviously the thing about Seth, and his character doesn't amplify this, but this feud with Punk gets to the core of, I think, why his heart is in this, is he does, and we saw it within some online banter understatement, vitriol with Will Ospreay. Seth does see himself as a defender of a version of the WWE that he believes is worth defending, and what the wrestlers do and the work they put in. And I do think there's, genuine hurt over Punk not just leaving, but breaking off communication with his colleagues, and then also trying to tear the company down when there were a lot of his friends who took bumps for him, did jobs for him. They learned from him, he learned from them. And, but I think what Punk spoke out against are things that people were fighting for internally. And in the end, I hope fans who are taking sides understand Punk had his way and Seth had his way, but they were both fighting for similar things, similar change. Okay, so I'd said Seth got knocked out. Darrell Freeman says, I don't think Seth got knocked out. He brought it, and Punk just came another level higher, but both were at a higher level than most people. No question about that. Yeah, this was
complete.
Yeah. Like, I want to be clear. Like, there are people who would get knocked out by Punk, and it's like they're dead. And to me, this was like Seth got knocked out, but I've seen MMA fighters get knocked out and they come back and they win 5 in a row and win a rematch. I mean, this is not like, just Punk had better material to work with. Seth watched some pitches go by him and didn't swing that I think he could have swung at. And I articulated them earlier. But Punk just had a better stance, and is a little fresher. And frankly, like I said, he is more authentic. The clown veneer does kind of take away from what is otherwise a serious argument. Tej, would you have thought Seth should come out without anything flamboyant, and just old Seth, the architect, and go, yeah, I left this other stuff behind. I enjoy, and like actually talk about the character a little bit. Like, I enjoy doing this. The fans enjoy it. Pro wrestling's a colorful business. I like playing mind games. It channels a different part of my personality that I think motivates me and elevates me and gets the fans interested. But we're not here for that. I'm here to talk as Colby. I'm here to talk as everyone knows me as Seth now, but throw in a little Colby reference before Punk can, before I get a Phil Colby battle, and and say, I'm dropping all that because this is serious stuff. We're talking about things that go beyond trying to get the crowd into us and motivated and cheering us. Maybe this would have been the night to do it.
100%. I mean, at this point, if Seth Rollins, the wrestler, walks out in a t-shirt and shorts, that on its own is a statement that, we're in store for a big change. I think, talking about where the excess come from will already lend it a level of humanity, because we talk about Elton John. Elton John freely admits he wears the exuberant outfits because he himself is not a dynamic performer. He's not Freddie Mercury. He's not Bowie. He's not Jagger. This is where he has fun and he lets loose and he shows his personality. For the Joker, it's to hide the darkness. It makes him feel unpredictable. For Seth, it just feels like excess for the sake of excess. And I do think that is a great statement to have in the chamber for when they really want to emphasize that Seth is stripping down and basics. Would this have been the time to do it? Yes. But I also think that, Seth held his own with just enough that no one came away thinking less of him after tonight's segment. So I think they got away without it. I don't think the looks detracted from the promo in any appreciable way. This is very much just nitpicking, I want to say. Like the chat's definitely saying these guys are both delivering at the top of their level. I agree. These guys clear 95% of everyone else in pro wrestling. And I do think we lose sight of that. We really are putting two heavyweights on the mic against each other.
Yeah.
I agree, Al. They touched me in the soul too.
Al Archer in the chat says, well, they touched me in the soul. I think Seth Rollins wanted to do better than he did. Like, I just think, maybe I don't say it's delusional. Maybe he's keeping score differently than me. I'll just say that. But I think Punk won on the scoreboard. How lopsided it was is in the eye of the beholder, and your biases and your favoritism, and that sounds slanted. But like who you're more sympathetic to is a more neutral way to put it. But I think Seth wanted to do better. But I think Punk from the beginning had a better stance. But there are places that each could have gone that they didn't, and then some places they went that probably wasn't great. But you're scoring points with me, Tej, with your comparisons of Elton John and the pros in Bowie and Jagger and Freddie Mercury. I'm staring at my Elton John book over here. I love his music. He had the best. Can I say? Well, he certainly had better vocals than Bowie and Mercury. Jagger's just different, but 70s Elton John is amazing. All right. Let's see. Let's get into a little bit more on the comment from the kid. Junaid said, Seth's comment about Punk not having a kid was the burn of the night. Very good back and forth promo, but I still kind of think Punk had more strong points with Seth as a corporate kiss ass. And Junaid says it's part 1 of 2. I'm chasing down part 2. Both men showed fire and made great points, but I feel Seth is holding on to something from 10 plus years ago and a little obsessed, but he's not wrong to feel like Punk didn't handle it well. Yeah, the part that I think you should have leaned on is just, you just said you had a problem with your boss. Do you have a problem with me? Do you want to tell me if you had a problem with me? Because I got a problem with you. When you left, we were worried about you. We traveled the roads together. I looked up to you. And you ghosted us. You didn't talk to us. What it said is you either didn't care or you didn't trust us. And we cared about you, and you could have trusted us. And that's that's for you to answer to. And if you ever want to apologize for that, you know how to reach me. You can do it now. You can do it later. But at some point, you're going to grow up and you're going to, come to terms with the fact that you aren't just perfect in how you handle it, no matter how righteous you feel. I think that was out there to be said. And for whatever reason, he didn't go there. But instead, he said, you're not a dad. Haha. I am. You'll never know. I wish he didn't say that. And I don't know what the definition of a burn is, but if you don't want to be a parent, it's not a burn. If you try to be a parent and you couldn't, it's a burn, and it sucks and it's cheap. So I don't really know how to frame that positively. I just don't.
I mean, if you're gauging it just by crowd reaction, sure, it was the loudest of the night, but it didn't really feel like it was in service of any element of either man's character. In fact, it felt like kind of out of character for Seth to say in that moment, yeah, the parent line was harsh, as Ken Arnold says in the chat.
I'll get to it to our podcast people. I won't put those up and distract you. I'm sorry.
No. I always have amplifying my point. So here, Ken, keep commenting, buddy, that you're amplifying my point here. But no, it's...
Yeah. I think of our podcast listeners, which is almost everybody, that's the majority, and they don't know what you're referencing. So I want to read them before we reference them. So I'm bad about distracting co-hosts when I throw something on. So go ahead.
I think that, unless, CM Punk and AJ Lee have had some well publicized struggle and want to have a kid that I'm completely unaware of, it felt like a line that was thrown out there to get the crowd to react loudly and make people think, ooh, this is serious. They're throwing personal barbs now.
Yeah.
And maybe this is just us nitpicking because we're such longtime hardcore fans of the industry and we've seen the best versions of all these promos. But
yeah,
I don't know. It just felt like a little bit eye-rolly. You know what I mean?
Well, and the thing is Punk's comeback was, you said I took my ball and went home. That's a cliche. That's what they tried to bury Steve Austin with. I've told Steve Austin he shouldn't apologize for saying no to doing a job with no build to Brock Lesnar when political games, I would argue, were being played in a way that doesn't behoove Steve Austin to draw attention to at this point, but was true at the time. Mm-hmm. I think Steve wishes he showed up and said no instead of no showing and saying. That's the part that I think no one ever gets that part. But I've talked to Steve on podcasts about it, and he's like, well, it's more I should have shown up and made my case, not stayed home. But that burial of him was BS. And I feel more strongly about it than he does to this day. I think he feels more bad than he should. But it was Vince trying to control the wrestlers and shame them into doing whatever they're told and never questioning anything and not showing any agency. Austin had agency, contributed a lot. And then they wanted to take a damaged version of Austin and politically damage him for something that could have meant a lot more. So I was totally on Austin's side at that time, and I'm more on his side than I think he is at this point. When it comes to that, the Becky thing of, she left. I thought that was one of Punk's weaker points. It's all kinds of reasons, but there's multiple reasons Becky's not there, and being home to be a parent is one of them. So I just don't think Punk should have brought her up in the way that he did. I think it needed more context. I think if Punk had said, different people disappear from TV for different reasons. The man, your wife, for instance, she's got her reasons. I'm not going to bury her. She has very valid reasons for not being here right now. Some are personal, not known. Some are, maybe there's things I don't even know. He could have said that, but it just came across as like, I gotcha. Your wife's not here. And so, then Seth, I think people justify Seth with his line about not being a parent as like a justified counterpunch. But to me, it just felt like it took it to a level higher. It's like, so anyway. We'll go to Ken's comment now. Man, that parent line was harsh. There are a lot of people every day who can't be parents for whatever reason, and that can sting. So Seth did great with that line. I'm not quite sure if he's, defending him or not. Derek Mitchell says, I always say everyone thinks they're the hero in their own story, but Seth just comes off really self-righteous and whiny, in my opinion. And then Sadler says, I didn't see the parent line as a cheap shot. Punk mentioned Becky taking her ball and going home, so Seth bit back. He didn't really dig the knife that deep. I think that's about as deep as it gets. I don't think you go there. No matter what and I'm not saying Punk wants to be a parent. I don't think he does, but I don't really know. But it just came across as like, parents are superior. And it's just a bad, there's a lot of people in that crowd who are like, oh, so you think less of me too, that kind of thing. Francisco Rosario says, I hear the point about parenting, but it was in response to Punk saying Becky took her ball and went home. I don't think it was entirely out of place, especially for someone that called Punk a cancer. So we got to the cancer part later. And Tej, this is where it gets a little tough. Because Punk, you're talking about something that is not part of WWE. It's part of WWE canon now, what happened in AEW, but it's not something they can explain to the audience. There's all kinds of reasons, legal and otherwise. So when Seth brings it up, it's by definition something that Punk can't explain his side of. He's not cleared to do so. It legally would be bad. It's just mucking up the waters. So it feels a little cheap for Seth to say something that implies it has to do with what he's done outside. Punk's been, by all accounts, doesn't mean all accounts cover everything that's happened, but Punk's been really good in the locker room on this run. And I've checked with people, every few months, and it's like, yeah, he's great. But he wasn't always in WWE before he left. He wasn't always before WWE. He's prickly and opinionated. And if he feels he's crossed, He can't let it go, and then it turns into something bigger than it ought to be. That's the pattern with him, and that was the case in AEW. But so Seth went to the cancer line, but he couldn't make his case stage. He couldn't. It's just so in a sense, Punk did well, even though he couldn't counterpunch that line with details. Nor do I think Punk wants to, because I don't know that he'd come out on the winning side of it when it comes to what happened in AEW.
So this is actually where I think we mildly disagree, right? I think the word cancer was, a little wink and a nod to the smarks in the audience, of which there were many because it's Houston. But I think that the point came across more, at least for me. He's talking about the summation of Punk's career and saying you are a net negative to this industry. Mm-hmm. What you are because he talks about like the years you were gone, like no one cared. It was all just CM Punk. No one was caring about the people that were still here. The good and the groundbreaking, you were a pioneer, but you've become this like stain. You're holding the industry back. It felt like he rode that line between, work shoot kind of industry insider comments and kind of judging Punk for what he's done to the wider kind of wrestling fan base as a whole. To me, it felt like he rode that line pretty well. To you, it seems like, he tipped a little bit too far into the industry insider side of things, but I don't know. It definitely felt like he got crowd responses that were still on par with what he was getting before. So, and one has to assume there's a lot of quote unquote casuals that wouldn't understand the subtext of the cancer line. So it didn't seem like it threw off the rhythm of the promo. So I'm more inclined to believe that, that didn't derail things as much as it did for you.
Yeah, and I don't know if derail is a word. It just came across as Seth knew he was saying something that Punk was not authorized or inclined to fire back about. In part because it's a winning line from Seth, because Punk has been a net negative in a lot of locker rooms. But and it doesn't help. By the way, as much as they're pulling from reality here, the truth is, for all we know, and I don't know either way, the Punk and Seth are texting, sharing Wordle scores at 12:02 p.m. every night. I don't know. They might be getting along great, and Punk's been great. So you don't want Seth going, I want to beat you up because since you came back, you've been nothing but a model employee. Like, he's not going to introduce that. So let's not treat this like this is, like an actual real life debate. This is pulling from real life in a way that is strategic in theory, and I think in execution, not destroying either wrestler, giving fans of both some lines that they can hang their, that they can point to and go, that's my guy. And I think they did that and build up a sense that these two want to tear each other apart. So we need to interject. Like, it's not real life. There's a lot of real life being pulled, a lot of public real life knowledge being pulled into this, but it's still, the goal is to draw ratings and sell tickets. And therefore any overlap with reality, it's not coincidence, but it's strategic. And it isn't the complete full feelings of both. Necessarily. It could be, but it might not be, because they're going to edit out whatever is counterproductive in theory, if they're doing their job to selling this match. So Seth going, you've been pretty good. I don't hate you as much as I did 2 years ago. Like, that's not going to sell the match next week. So Seth's going to work with what he's got to work with. Punk's been a good sport about it, obviously, in how he's reacted to things. We do have fans having to choose, and there's a lot of that going on at WWE. Junaid says, Wade, a little hypocritical from you about not rooting for one over the other. No, usually say that wrestling is about a home team and an away team rooting for one over the other. So, Junaid, I just think you misunderstand sort of completely my point on this. I think wrestling promoters should set up a clear-cut home team that aligns with who fans naturally like, and then amplify and lean into that. And they should have them opposite on the microphone, opposite in the ring, 97% of the time, somebody who the fans have an inclination not to like, and then lean into what they don't like about them, as they're doing with New Day right now, for example. I'm not against exceptions. I just think the key word there is exception, not rule. You want it to feel novel. There's so much history to pull from here. And when I say I'm not rooting for one or another, I'm not being a hypocrite, because they're not trying to sell me a ticket. My job is a journalist, an analyst. And I don't, but that doesn't, sometimes I might privately be like, I want this person to show up, this person on the mic, because I know too much about him and I don't like him. That's not the case here. I think Seth and Punk, I'm not looking for one to destroy the other. And like in real life, I'm not harboring any feelings that would make me like root one or the other. But they're not trying to sell me tickets. I'm watching these shows as part of my job. I've done it 35 plus years. I'm done being a customer in that sense. They're not trying to target me. This is my occupation. So when I say I'm not rooting for one or the other, my point is my analysis is not rooted in wanting an outcome. But that has nothing to do with the booking setup. Now, the booking setup, Tej, has been fun. Let's step back for a minute. This is a case where fans are having to choose. We don't know how this is going to end, and it's not going to end on Monday. Is either guy hurt? Are both guys stronger? Because somebody in the chat pointed out how Punk got hurt a little bit during the Drew thing, and this was a good comeback for him. How do you think Seth and Drew are doing now with their own fan base? Are they winning people over? Are they turning people off? Do they have to turn one of them when this is all said and done? How do you feel about that aspect of it?
See, this is where I think a hot crowd can really enhance the presentation of a promotion overall, because when you have crowds that are as invested in both men, no matter what their alignments are, you get people popping for almost every line, even if, they're not taking the exact bit of information that the wrestlers maybe want them to take in that split second. And that's how I think they've been able to carry this feud so far without having one member be overly heelish and one member clearly playing the babyface. That being said, you can only have one winner next week, Raw on Netflix. Yep. And it is to move this to WrestleMania, which is definitely what it feels like. You will have to establish one person essentially chasing the other. And there are a lot of different ways that can go. I think thematically, Seth's entire emotional flaw in the buildup has been his inability to let go of the past. Almost every gripe he has with Punk has been, you did this, you acted this way, you left me. Whereas Punk's fatal flaw has been he hasn't admitted the past in a way. Like, he began this feud almost unwilling to think about Seth. He said, I'm not concerned with Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins means nothing to me. He's been talking about himself and why he did what he did, but the CM Punk trademark, and I don't mean this as an insult, he has not shown that contrition. So each of them has a little bit of growing to do. Who can best do their growing being the winner and who can best do their growing being the loser? I think that's up for debate, and I'd love to talk a little bit about that with you. I think Punk is best suited to win on January 6th Raw on Netflix, because it definitely feels like they've been moving Seth more towards a heelish position, especially because, they put him against Drew McIntyre, so people could see the parallels in the past couple of weeks. And I think his inability to let go of the past and continue to chase Punk at the expense of, furthering his career in other ways or helping out his fellow babyfaces will continue to be the route moving forward. I'm curious to see what you think, though.
Well, I'll throw in a comment that Darrell says, I think the real question is whether they go after this match with these two, because to me, it feels like whoever wins this should be next up for a title shot against Gunther. I don't think it's going to be just clean wins, feud settled, it's over. And I think Punk should win. I think there's more money in Punk's big matches that he hasn't had yet. But I think wins and losses should matter to characters. And so, it's like Gunther lost to Cody, and that turned into a thing they talked about. Like, I like when bookers own finishes instead of run from them or just sweep them under the rug and go, we sold you that this was a big match, but now that there's been an outcome, don't think about who lost. Just think about who won, but don't think about who lost. Like, well, that makes us care less about future matches. You want winners and losers to have ramifications. So to me, if Punk beats Seth, I think that should be a big moment in the trajectory of the Seth character. It could be he abandons the clown show stuff and gets serious again. It might mean he goes more Joker, wacky, crazy, and loses his marbles, and people are trying to figure out who he is. I think it should be something that propels him in a new, fresh direction, because I just don't think there's a WrestleMania main event on the horizon for him without some changes or just some time. If Seth just goes and works, a feud with whoever, a second tier heel, because all the top matches are taken, that's not good for him if it's this same character who lost to Punk. So I'm intrigued with what they do. It's their job to think about it and think about all the other moving parts and decide the pace at which they tell the story and what's best. But to me, this should be Punk's feud to win. And maybe by design, Punk won the verbal battle because they wanted him to, because they didn't want to do damage to this brand that is a centerpiece more than, obviously more than Seth of the Netflix advertising. They know they've got, and Punk's proven himself, the last year. I mean, he's somebody that I think they feel they can rely on other than durability, and that's something they just have to be careful about. And he's got to be careful too. All right. Some other chat room comments on this, a topic that we will continue to cover. We'll get to that Vince topic too. I want to get into that. Let's see. Here's Darrell again. I'll just say, I also think Punk needed a night like this where people see him as a winner in a big promo after Drew whooping him in their feud on the mic, and people felt that he couldn't do it anymore. So that's the comment I was looking for earlier. Francisco says, agreed with Tej. They're less witty, but it's consistent with his character that just told us he's not apologetic for anything he's done. Goodfella 1422 says, I think that's very personal, which these verbal exchanges have been since the start. I think no kid burn is being analyzed too harshly, except to burn Punk.
I mean, I definitely agree. And I think that reading that comment, it definitely makes you realize we have to step back and really remember that we are nitpicking to performers that are at the top of their game. I think that no matter who wins and who loses, it'll set them both on very different paths, but they both have solidified themselves as upper card talent, main event talent in WWE. And moving into WrestleMania, I do foresee both of them having marquee matches on the card. I am curious, though. It definitely feels as if Punk has been groomed for a main event world championship match. That was the original intent when he worked against Seth Rollins before he got injured in the 2024 Royal Rumble. However, it feels like he's been largely siloed away from the title scene. He's been in just these grudge matches and these blood feuds against Drew and now Seth. So I'm very curious to see how he finds himself back in the title scene if Seth is still a part of that story, because there've been these little teases for Gunther versus Punk in the past couple of months. That's definitely a match that could main event right night one of WrestleMania. Could we see a three-way? Because we know Gunther and Seth have absolutely incredible chemistry, and that would be a world heavyweight championship match for the ages. I don't know, but I'm very curious to see if they get away with just keeping Punk in a blood feud for WrestleMania 41. I feel like, honestly, it would be a waste of him at this point, because we've seen him in a blood feud. We've seen him in Hell in a Cell. I want to see him fighting for something tangible to make his mark in the new WWE. I don't think we've seen him do that yet.
Yeah. Yep. By the way, Ryan Solorio says, I kind of want them sharing Wordle scores at 12:02 in the morning to be true now. LOL. Yes. I'd be just.
I don't know where you came up with that. That was hilarious. That's such a funny image. Becky and AJ like, go back to sleep. He's like, not now, honey. I'm
totally, yes.
Middle rows flash. Yeah.
By the way, do you think Jonathan Ertl on Facebook watching us live says, I think they're planting seeds for a Becky versus AJ match? LOL. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, it feels like it can exist without that, but maybe they are.
Jonathan, mate, you and I, we can both dream. That has been a legitimate dream match for me ever since Becky began the man character all the way back in, 2018. If AJ does come back, that is a match that I want to see. I don't know if it's a setup right now for that, but, who knows? I've been surprised before.
Francisco says, I think Seth is being purposely portrayed as petty, inclusive of tonight's zingers, in preparation for him to lose it and fully turn, similar to what Tej said. There we go. And Brock is thinking, if Punk wins, Seth goes on a downward spiral. And I think that could be a compelling match. From a crowd standpoint, it's getting into, fans kind of choosing sides and maybe not wanting to. Junaid talking about the home team, away team thing. Seth has been the home team. Punk was the away team. Seth brought up he went to the competition. JC Scooby 1976 says Punk won and is effaced by the crowd. Fans were chanting CM Punk. No one is chanting Seth's name. People don't really chant Seth's name. They sing his entrance song, but there's not really like a Rollins type thing that people do. So it's unfortunate, because I wish they did, because it'd be interesting if there was this Seth portion of the crowd, but we didn't get a dueling chant. That said, I mean, I do think right now the fan base is more into Punk, more than Seth, and I think it hurts Seth a little bit because he has been around and a regular, but he's got to be self-aware to know his character has not had the integrity and that kind of constitution and cool factor that Punk has had. Okay, let's bring Dan into the conversation here. A caller who's been standing by. Dan, welcome. What's on your mind about Raw tonight?
I mean, I think you guys pretty much covered everything.
We've only covered one topic that lasted 12 minutes on a 2-hour show, and a little bit on the Vince thing, but we have spent
1
50
hour.
minutes.
Come on, man! It's 11 o'clock in the East Coast.
I'll
talk about something else.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, the Punk Seth thing was like, I think 12 minutes once we got past ring entrances. So we certainly gave that a good dose, but there's a lot of other stuff here.
Well, Wade, I'm glad you're feeling better, and I'm glad you didn't take your ball and go to the room next door for the second week in a row.
Yes.
I want to talk about the Otis Gable thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a strange callback after like months of not, like following up through it. And then now I'm just like feeling too little too late. I don't care anymore.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of crowd reaction for Otis last week and even this week. I mean, I don't know. It does feel a little bit late. And the Creeds just kind of seem like comedy figures. They've been pulled down by this shtick rather than Gable bringing them up. Tej, I don't think that's been great for any of them. I mean, a little pep talk from Ray for Otis afterwards is fine. But I mean, not everybody's going to be top tier talent. But, this does feel like it's past its freshness state. Your thoughts?
100%. I mean, Gable and Otis, it hurts so much for me because they had a genuinely white hot mid-card story that it feels like was lost, and bringing it back now, like you said, Dan, just feels like almost pointless. It would have been better to just kind of let sleeping dogs lie and say, hey, you know what? We didn't get a happy ending because Gable was selfish and he decided to abandon us, and that's the end of the story. Kind of trying to tie it back in out of nowhere of people saying I can't move on because Otis is just existing, sullying what I'm trying to build now. It feels forced. And when you notice the booking and you notice WWE trying to fit puzzle pieces where the audience is not interested in seeing them go, that's when it really kind of takes you out of the story. So I'm completely with you there. It is telling that Gable and Otis, seasoned performers, they got the crowd going by the end. But it's telling that the loudest pop of that segment was when Maxine went out against Ivy Nile, because that's a relationship that feels fresh. It feels new. Their arc and betrayal felt more realistic than Gable and Otis is at this point. And I'm more interested in seeing that pairing at this point.
Dan, go ahead.
I was just thinking, I was like, well, what I was really thinking was like Triple H just like didn't have any more creative stories for Gable or Otis, and he's like, let me go through back to this type of thing.
I mean, it's fine. I mean, it is the last Raw on USA Network, and they're going to be they've got a loaded show on Netflix, and there's going to be a little bit of filler. I mean, there's tons of backstory to it, but yeah, I mean, I mean, it was what? I mean, we got semifinals to a, kind of women's tournament and a good 6-man tag. I mean, it's not like they didn't, fill the show well, but, it was just sort of there.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Not everything's going to be like main event worthy.
Yeah, I didn't really think the show was that great other than like the main event with the last promo. So I really don't have anything else to talk about. It seems more like the tournament is like kind of like ripping off AEW, honestly.
Well, I mean, there was a lot. Well, thanks, Dan. There was a lot of what went on in that promo that could have happened with the Bucks if they wanted to, Tej. Lady B says, can't help but be a bit sad that this is everything Punk's view of the Elite could have been. I hope this is a reminder you can hate each other and still make money, I guess selflessly, so fans can enjoy. And I mean, Tej, is part of this an attempt to make money off of what AEW failed to? I mean, Seth isn't, I don't think he's pals with the Bucks, but is he sort of channeling them a little bit? A little bit, because obviously Seth's issues are what Punk walking out on him and not returning his calls. I mean, they have a history, but they're cognizant of the fact that some fans are looking at this going, yeah, Punk's controversial and Seth is kind of picking at that. But they've shown restraint other than saying you went to the competition. How did that go? By referencing, I mean, they don't want to put Jack Perry over. They're not referencing. They could have had digs. They could have said, you're an elite locker room cancer. So, I mean, I don't know, like made references to where people could read between the lines, but they've chosen not to.
I mean, I don't think it was done with any specific intent. And, Lady B, I'm right there with you. I was so excited when Punk came back the first time when Collision launched, because I thought that they were leading to Punk versus the Elite, which could have been absolutely incredible if all parties had worked something out. But AEW at this point is such a different animal. Outside of MJF, outside of Jericho, and maybe Eddie Kingston, nobody's really doing those long in-ring promos. So I don't know if a grudge feud like that would have been anywhere close to the animal that it kind of is in WWE. So I don't know if making that comparison was intentional by WWE, or if it is beyond anything more than a few insider references. I think will kind of water down what they're trying to do and stand on their own. I don't know. There is a little bit of, us AEW diehards that are in the audience are just like, oh, we could have had this too, man. But at this point, I don't think that, anyone's trying to flip the bird at AEW at this point, because it would just make them seem petty. And like you said, Wade, I don't think they're trying to be petty at this point. They're very secure in where they are. You're muted.
They are very secure in where they are. Let's get into the Vince McMahon thing a little bit here. Somebody had mentioned in the chat they didn't even notice that Vince wasn't in it till I brought it up. But yeah, he wasn't. But what did you think of that aspect of it? Elaborate more, but also what they did include. You had to have Austin and Tyson shoving each other. You want to have some tribute to Bray Wyatt, and they did that. Yeah, was it representative of what you think of tribute video? I mean, little parenthetical aside here. They're leaving USA Network. USA is letting them draw a lot of attention to that, but they're still partners with SmackDown. And so they're in a good relationship in the TV industry. Sometimes you get outbid, but it doesn't mean you hate each other. And I thought WWE did a really good job giving USA, paying tribute to the relationship that they've had with USA with one interruption over the decades, and playing a tribute video, and also saying, hey, you still got SmackDown. But this was not a build for the new Friday SmackDown, tune in. This was very much a 2-hour commercial for the most part for Raw and Netflix, and USA let them do it. I think USA knows there's a chance SmackDown audience grows because people are going to get addicted to Raw and Netflix who don't have cable, and they might go back to cable. So, I mean, one hand can wash the other here. It can be good. But yeah, talk about the video itself, and then kind of part two, just the overall tone towards USA.
I mean, it definitely speaks to what a moneymaker WWE is as a whole, because it would be very easy for, certain suits or suit types at the network to say, like, we don't want this to be brought up because it'll make it seem like, you're leaving for bigger and better things. You're moving to Netflix, and USA was small time and WWE's growing, which is natural. You don't want USA to feel obsolete or small. That's not your job if you're a TV executive. So, I think there's trust that's been built up with the USA Network, and that trust is being cashed in at this moment in terms of certain inclusions in the promo, and not just Vince McMahon, but, superstars that are no longer with the company. I think it's a statement from Triple H and WWE brass that they are willing to acknowledge their past. They're testing the waters to see what people think, and where the outrage begins. Because, and I think that sometimes we as viewers kind of forget about this. WWE does not care about viewer outrage if it does not hurt the bottom line, right? It's a little bit more invisible now, but if we all remember the infamous Me and My Friend Mark promo from 2014, they don't care if viewers are angry online. If you're tuning in, they're doing their job, right? And I can only assume that cutting out all references of Vince McMahon must be an absolute pain in the ass for whatever poor soul is in charge of WWE archives right now, the WWE Vault. So if they can sneak in a little bit here in the background and people don't really care because they know it's a necessary evil, that makes their job easier behind the scenes. This felt like, just dipping their toe just ever so slightly into that. I don't think it's anything more. feels like a calculated business decision and nothing else.
I think it would have been a real statement worth almost headlining with if they had featured a lot of Vince McMahon, or even just opened with him and Rob Bartlett in that first Raw, because it would have said we're not scared of his face, his being on, on our TV show right now, and they did not do that. And to me, that they didn't do it isn't surprising, but it's confirming of something that totally is the right decision to make. Had they featured him as like, okay, that's brazen and politically dangerous and probably going to upset a variety of people, and it would have shown, I think, especially with the Lee Fitting story a week or so ago, that maybe they just think they're bulletproof, and we have our history, and we're just gonna, we're not gonna apologize for it or even edit it out. So by not, it was like I said about Stephanie when Vince retired and she went on TV and said, let's go Vince, or thank you Vince. It was the bare minimum that she could have done that would not have made news. It was just enough of a tribute where with a straight face, she could look at you and go, I started a thank you Vince chant. I said it, but it's about the wrestlers. It's not about us. She could have said that with a straight face. It was the bare minimum to not make news. It was very smartly calculated. But my God, if it wasn't scandal ridden and Stephanie and Vince were like on the same page instead of essentially estranged by accounts that I've heard, it would have been very different. There was always going to be the day when Vince retired or died, where it was going to be all about him, even if he didn't want it to be about him. There was going to be a point where it would be, and it wasn't. And now here we are. And he's, as somebody said in the chat, like a certain wrestler who gets edited out of everything. He's more the scratch logo in that sense too, where it's just a pain to try to keep him out of stuff. Anyway, we've got our on-site correspondent, Mike B, joining us now. Had to be a fun building to be inside tonight. Mike, welcome. Thanks for calling. Sorry for sending you the wrong link and making you wait.
Yeah, no problem, Wade. He's been doing this to me for about 4 years, but I just wanted, before we get started, first and foremost, congratulations on the Vikings win this past weekend, sir.
Oh, it's so fun. I mean, yeah, that game next week, it's moved. It's Sunday Night Football. Obviously, it was going to be. By the way, not that I care that much, but don't spoil the Lions game tonight for me. I'll probably put it on the background when I'm doing some editing. It's meaningless, but I still want to kind of, if anybody got injured or whatever, I kind of want to be surprised. But yeah, that's going to be great. I'm feeling good about the team. But my God, we had 5 minutes left. They're writing Green Bay's epitaph. Not an epithet, an epitaph. And then they make this comeback, and we were like one third down incompletion away from maybe losing because of that 2-point conversion. So, but yeah, we're good at pulling it out at the end. It's been a really, really, really unexpectedly fun, surprisingly great season. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you, Mike.
Anyway, yeah. Absolutely. So I was able to, it's funny you with the wrong link. I have my son in my car with me, and we got the YouTube going on. I'm like, man, I haven't done this calling before, but I'm pretty sure it says I'm waiting. But regardless, Wade, as you said, super incredible fun show to be at, and it just goes to show you what a 2-hour show can do with 4 matches that aren't. I mean, 5 if you include the R-Truth and Pete Dunne stuff, but I mean, really shows you what a tight show with a hot product can do. I mean, it was probably one of the funnest shows I've ever been to in my life, and I was not looking forward to going to it after looking at the card that was presented before me.
Did you have any feeling like we're here to watch the commercial for the big show in LA next week? I was worried about that when I saw, especially when the crowd was 14,000 plus, that Houston would feel a little slighted.
No, absolutely, especially from having moved to Texas about 3 years ago from SoCal, from Los Angeles. I'm feeling a little slighted, but nevertheless, it was a real fun show. It kind of was what it was, watching and being to shows over the years. I kind of knew what we were getting ourselves into, buying these tickets that were not cheap, by the way. Oh, I don't remember spending this much money for 400 section seats in my entire life, but nevertheless.
What'd you spend?
$128 a ticket, but first row. I mean, no one in front of me, clear view of the entrance ramp. That's really what I went for tonight. But nevertheless, very, very, very hot product. I mean, 39, almost 40 went to a lot of Attitude Era shows. I was telling my son Cohen, I can't remember. I mean, truly remember having gone to those shows, someone being more over than Jey Uso is right now.
Wow.
Like, I mean, absolutely fat crap crazy, man. I mean, I've never seen it. And I saw Austin, and I just never seen it. Like, I feel like the pop's relative to Austin. I really do.
Wow. Well, I mean, coming through the crowd, the music, he's super over. They've got something there. When they were showing the fan signs at one point on the show, Tej, they, people were going, my first Raw. And I was just like, I know how exciting my first wrestling event was. And, to be part of a crowd that big and that great of a venue with that star power and that crowd heat, I mean, it's a memory people are going to carry with them. And they're drawing such good crowds in so many cities now. There's so many first-time fans who are discovering this product.
Sold out, guys. Definitely sold out, 100%.
Yeah.
It was, crazy. A year ago when we went, it was not like this. I mean, I kind of put in my email to you, a year ago, I was seeing 50 to 100, AEW shirts. I saw nothing tonight.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Absolutely nothing. We saw one MJF fan walking through, and everyone booed him. It was fantastic. But aside from that, it was absolutely nothing, Wade. It's crazy to me how much 365 days a calendar year can change a product like this. I am not nearly as versed on this product as I had been, growing up and, having the privilege of watching and listening to the Torch. I've been able to vicariously live through it based on life and schedule changes and et cetera and keep up with it. But I mean, honestly, I cannot say enough for how well this show came across in person for being what it was.
You said how over Jay was. Talk about what else seemed really, really, really over with this audience.
I mean, so it was four tonight for me. It was obviously Jay. The New Day is ridiculously over, obviously. I mean, they found something. He's getting the Dom Mysterio stuff. I mean, even more, they were in the post-show. Who was it? It was the New Day and Santos versus LA Knight, Jay, and a hobbled Rey Mysterio, it looked like, at, post-show. But, I mean, the New Day is incredibly over. Obviously, I heard a little bit of your guys' tail end of your conversation as it pertained to the CM Punk and Seth Rollins. Obviously, those four acts were by far the most over. Nothing else was close. Nothing. I mean, everybody was over. It reminded me a lot of the Crash Holly days, just like Crash Holly's over and Perry Saturn's over. And my goodness, everybody's over. But, I mean, those four acts were definitely over. To be honest, I kind of agree with you guys as well. As someone who's wanted kids his entire life, I thought the cutting to the kid stuff was a little lowbrow. But it's professional wrestling, so I'm just like, it is what it is sometimes. But I mean, man, I again, a ton of money for a show that we knew was literally going to be a hype for the next week, and it was well worth $250, if that makes sense. It was crazy. The environment made it.
Yeah. And I want to clarify too. I don't think the line about not having kids was out of line. I think it was counterproductive if you want to be sympathetic. That's my point. If you're going for sympathy, if it's a heel line and everyone's okay with it, then say it. It's pro wrestling. I agree with that. My argument is just I think Punk was doing really well, and then Seth noticed that, and then instead of having a good line, which he had some, he left. He didn't take a swing at. He took what felt like a cheap shot that I think could cost him some fans. So to me, it was counterproductive for what Seth was going for. There's times.
Do you think it was lazy? Do you think they knew it was going to be over regardless? So it was just kind of there was nothing else on the card to main event. Would you guys agree? I mean, that's pretty much what it was. I mean, the tag was okay. The Lyra and Io match was obviously the best match pretty easily. The matches were fine. I mean, it was nothing fancy. I kind of felt like the promo was what the promo was just because they knew they could get away with it, in my opinion.
What do you think, Tej?
I think that's kind of where I was coming from too. Mike, it definitely feels like what you're saying is this crowd was ready to be hot-blooded, ready to cheer these performers, and moving to kind of end the televised portion of the show with that felt like, a statement. It felt like saying, yeah, this is where we are. We know we've got something hot right here. And I think, I think ending on a promo is always risky because it's a wrestling show. It's about the wrestling. Yeah. But I didn't have a huge problem with it. I thought it genuinely was all right, this is the last time we get to see these two guys really go at it on the mic, which no discredit to CM Punk's skill in the ring, but he's strongest on the mic. we can end with this and we'll send the crowd home. We'll send the TV product home happy. And that's just kind of where I thought it, that's where I thought it stemmed from. I'm curious to you, my friend, what do you think about the responses to the women's intercontinental tournament? Because it definitely felt like the crowd really came alive for Lyra versus Io in a way that was very, very pronounced, because the crowd was very quiet at the beginning. There wasn't a huge amount of build. And by the end, you were getting This Is Awesome chants, which we didn't really get anywhere else on the show.
Yeah, well, my son and myself kind of talked about that. I mean, obviously it was a slow build. It started at 8:30. We're like, man, there hasn't been a lot of big matches. How long is this Punk versus this Punk versus Rawlings promo gonna get to in the show? And I was thinking it'd be like, a 7-8 minute match, give the guys 20 minutes, but I was actually pleased as the match continued on. I was like, man, they're really getting to a lot of spots early, and they just kept letting him go and kept letting him go and kept letting him go. And I think it really earned the crowd's, respect towards the end of the match. I mean, obviously it was the best match of the night. The Judgment Day coming out to a new theme, I believe it was, didn't help.
Yeah.
Absolutely dead. Everyone in our section's like, who is this? And like, oh. Like, so that was kind of a bummer to do it, the night before. But yeah, no, absolutely. I thought that match was by far the best of the night. I thought from my perspective, I thought Zoe and Dakota had a good match. It was fine. Nothing to write home about, but definitely the main match of the night was deserved. Those two ladies, I thought they did fantastic, and they really got the crowd into it. I don't really think they had a preference for one of the two women. I don't feel like any of the women were really cheered over another, to be completely honest. Obviously Zoe, got a little heat. They had the Fusion Collective on main event as well, so they kind of did a lot of stuff like that. I thought to prep Zoe heading into the show, trying to, having her do a lot of stuff at main event to have that fresh in your mind. I thought they did a lot of stuff like off camera with New Day as well between commercial breaks to try to build a lot of heat that way. And I just thought the show was super. I mean, I don't know, man. I've been to so many shows. I thought that show was super smart, booked on and off television. Like, WWE is more than in a groove right now. They are firing on all cylinders to a level I cannot recall seeing in a very long time. Like, the show was fantastic, honestly.
From a crowd makeup standpoint, is there anything demographically different about it? Is it that from your other attendance, your other times attending shows in recent years and over the decades, did anything jump out, or is it just a more of the same, just a more enthusiastic crowd?
So definitely, WWE, as I think you said on the Fix with Todd Martin a couple weeks ago, they've, or maybe it was Todd speaking to the, WWE always targeting, the kids, and you can target a promotion around kids if, you do it correctly. Cena obviously had lots of kids there, and I don't think necessarily it had went away completely, but it had to kind of, tapered off a little bit. But definitely with the Jey Uso and the Yeet stuff, I mean, it was children for Jey all over the place. I mean, he had to have probably 75% of the shirts in the audience. It was crazy. Like 75%. It was like seeing John Cena again. Like, wow. It was crazy. Like, in terms of the breakdown and the split between the shirts and the demographic with the kids. Obviously the other shows I've only really ever seen are in the, San Diego, Los Angeles area. So again, Houston being a large Hispanic base as well. Like, I saw a lot of that. I can't really speak to anything other than that. From the crowd's perspective, kind of the same jib. A lot of the, the Latino workers were on the show on main event and, featured on the main card as well. So kind of that, but I don't know. Like, I don't feel like WWE from the shows I've been to have worked the commercial breaks and have worked the going from one thing to another so well. Really, I don't know how it came across on TV. Obviously, I'll watch it back later, but I felt that the end live experience was fantastic, and they really transitioned well in through everything. Like, it really flowed well.
Talk a little more about the dynamic with Punk and Seth and the crowd response to them. Did you sense there was a certain ratio at the beginning and it shifted? Did fans seem like they were fans of both and sort of popping for the ooh ah OMG lines? Like, talk about the dynamic in that building.
Yeah, guys, kind of what you were touching on earlier, man. I thought the promo in itself, they kept going really traditionally back and forth, lines, jabs, back and forth, and really, I'd be like, oh, everyone's, they're riding with Rollins, and then Punk would come back, and everyone's on Punk's side, and then they'd go back to Rollins' side, and then Punk's side. So it was really just kind of like a back and forth. I don't really feel like Seth or Punk was more over than one another. I would say maybe 53-47 Punk, maybe. But it really felt like it was pretty well split to me, at least in my section. everyone was just kind of, like you said earlier, just oohing and ahhing at the lines, the jabs, just to have the jabs. I don't feel like, at least in person, that one was given more to do or to say than the other. I know you guys kind of touched on, you thought Punk got a little bit more, and I can totally see your perspective on that. But in the moment, for me, and where I was at and who I was around, it didn't really feel like one was getting a bigger reaction than the other. Everyone was just kind of going absolutely crazy for both, and they were excited to see both two mega stars in the building playing to them.
Did it seem like the lines that alluded to Vince landed with a crowd in a way, or is this a casual mainstream audience and they're not thinking about that like we are?
I think that was a very casual mainstream audience. I didn't get much of a reaction whatsoever as it pertained to the crowd feel. Everyone was kind of like it was just like any other line they were saying.
Was there any part of that promo where you felt they lost the crowd? It got a little too meta, too insider, too history, too much referencing history from a long time ago. Any sense of that at all? I mean, it's hard when the building's, on fire for two stars going at it, but anything you extrapolated from it?
No, obviously, as you guys kind of stated, they kind of did the dog whistle stuff for those of us who have followed it a little bit deeper over the years, right? But in terms of the promo and how all the crowd was reacting in and of itself, and it being a very mainstream crowd, I felt like, I mean, very, very mainstream.
It has to be. It's 15,000 people. That's a mainstream
their target
crowd.
Demo, it was absolutely, they hit all the notes. They played all the hits. They paused at the right times. They let it sit at the right times. I mean, again, from the beginning of the show with Jay and the New Day, like, everybody was a professional on that show who they gave in-ring time on the microphone to tonight, and it shows to me. It really does. They played to everybody that they needed to play to, and they just set it up perfectly. I don't know. I mean, I haven't listened to the show with you guys yet. I'll obviously go back and listen to it in the morning, but I know I keep saying it. Wait, I have never been to a show that was this well laid out in person, honestly. And like I said, I've been going to a lot of shows. I've seen some WCW shows as well, so there's that. But I mean, it was absolutely incredible to see them weave in and out of stuff. And if this is what we have in the future, I'm looking forward to it. I do wonder, as I mentioned earlier, if going back to 3 hours, I mean, I know it'll get more of the mid-card in and stuff. Is it going to be a thing or not? I don't know. But it really, to me, showed me and reminded me, having gone to those late era Attitude shows before they went over, like, 2 hours to me is a sweet spot, man, with a hot product. It really is.
Yeah. Tej.
I mean, I want more.
Tej, jump in.
So, Mike, I actually had a question for you. You said dark match was New Day and Santos versus LA Knight, Jay, and Rey Mysterio, correct?
Yes.
Great. So here's what I'm wondering. How was the reception to LA Knight in comparison to the other two babyfaces on his team? Because the reason I say that is it definitely felt like his U.S. title reign wasn't really what it could have been. It felt like he didn't really get the chance to show out on the mic in what was his forte. And I'm curious to see, did fans feel a little tepid? Were they not really sure what to think of him at this point? Or was he still kind of holding his own against two of the most, popular babyfaces right now in Jay and Rey Mysterio?
No, definitely. And it was funny because my son and I actually talked about it now. I thought because everything was so hot tonight, everybody was just so incredibly over. So I don't have a real good feeling for that. I thought as it pertained to Rey and Jay, obviously, I mean, Jay still had the first and the second and the third biggest reactions of the night every time he appeared. But I thought LA Knight got a bigger response than Rey Mysterio, to be completely honest. And that was surprising given the target area where I'm at is largely Hispanic. You know what I mean? That was kind of surprising. But Rey Mysterio also, I mean, he was kind of, I don't want to, begrudge the guy. He was definitely moving the slowest, definitely was outside of the ring for the majority of the match. He definitely showed his age a little bit, as he should. But I mean, I thought LA Knight was incredibly over as well. I mean, from his catchphrases to his moveset, everyone knew everything. And if there's burnout for LA Knight, I don't think it showed tonight.
That's really interesting to hear because, LA Knight was, I think, one of the biggest kind of organic success stories that WWE had in the past couple of years. And I would really hate to see that wasted because of a title reign that was still good, still serviceable, just not really what it could have been. And speaking of largely Hispanic populations, I'm curious about if you guys saw in the arena the tease for the mystery wrestler that at this point is very clearly Penta El Zero Miedo. And, as a Los Angelino myself, I'm in Los Angeles right now. I'm curious if you saw any of the indie shows where Penta was really making his name in the Lucha Underground days or in PWG. What did the local crowd seem to know what they were referencing? Was there any pop when Ray mentioned having a mystery partner to take on the New Day? Was there any reaction at all?
Okay, so I wasn't sure if that was what they were saying. It was very loud in the building tonight. I mean, a little bit of it. I mean, I didn't get to any Lucha Undergrounds. I was forbade to go down into that area where those things were being taped. Like, I mean, we watched the whole series, of course, but, forbidden at the time to go down there and take my, at that time, 6-year-old son to those shows. So we didn't do that. But regardless, everyone knows it's Penta at this point. I'm assuming that's going to know. I mean, I guess the real question is him and Rey Mysterio making it through the first night, or is he turning on Rey? That's kind of where I'm going with. But aside from that, like, I mean, everyone knew who knew. And aside from that, there's a lot of people in our area that are like, what's this? Like, as well. So I don't know if his name is widely known. I think everyone who would know knows, and who doesn't. I mean, I'm not sure how widely known he is to the WWE audience, because I don't know, Wade, like, the WWE audience and AEW don't really cross over, right? Like, the mainstream part of it. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I don't think the WWE fans are going to be like, the majority are going to be like, whoa, this guy, this is great. I don't think Penta reached that level in AEW with AEW fans, to be honest. Not the ones who,
Yeah. I think where I was coming from is, you're in Texas. Did the AAA fans, were they in support? Did they know who he was? Did any indie fans, any smarks?
I didn't
have
see
any
many.
pronounced reactions.
It's like I said, it's wild, man. Every show I've been to WWE-wise, there's been a lot of people wearing shirts to go basically in protest of WWE with the AEW stuff, with a lot of the indie stuff, and there was none of it. Like, there was absolutely none of it. It was all WWE fans. It was absolutely wild. I was not expecting it. I saw 1 or 2 Lucha masks, maybe, but they were Rey Mysterio masks. So I mean, it wasn't there was no rebellion against WWE as I have seen in the past. It was all just literally everybody in support of WWE, which I think is what made the show extremely enjoyable. Everyone was there to just have a good time.
Mike, is there anything else you want to add about your experience tonight?
Not really, guys. I appreciate you putting me on again, Wade. I feel like we do this once a year. But honestly, it was an absolutely incredible show. I feel like the last couple times I called, I wasn't really thrilled or high on WWE. Right now, I mean, I can't speak highly enough of a show that I went to that I spent way too much money on for a card that was not fantastic, to come away with this probably being one of my top 10 shows I've ever attended in my life. Like, it was just flowed incredibly. I don't know. In-person experience, it was definitely up there. Thanks for your time as always, Wade. Thanks for doing what you do for the past 30 plus years. The Fix is still probably my favorite show on, but it is what it is. No offense, Taj. I just love me some Todd Martin. What can I say?
Thanks, Mike.
My friend.
Appreciate your support. Yeah, appreciate your support over the years, Mike.
Bye.
What was I going to say? That's something he said. The crowd enthusiasm. 5 years ago, that was AEW's secret weapon. It's like the crowd enthusiasm for their dynamites. Even it was better than the booking, and character building and all that. It's like it's just everyone is being elevated because the crowds are so red hot. And WWE has that now. You can see a show that on paper looks like, a couple random women's matches outside of the tournament format, kind of a filler 6-man tag, advertised match that didn't happen. And yet it's a top 10 show for him. And it's because it's that energy in the building. It's a rock show now. Yeah, it's great. Okay. Let's go to David Wolf in Washington, D.C. in the mailbag. Wade and Tej, I'm fascinated whether by design or poetic coincidence, Raw's final segment on the USA Network was as close as WWE has come to taking an anti-Vince shot on air. CM Punk's message was that he left WWE because of the paragon of virtue, Vince McMahon, returned when Vince was gone, and that Seth Rollins, a corporate shill, was one of Vince's favorites. Had to be a bit of a gut punch to Vince watching at home. I don't know how Vince feels about it. He might be fuming mad. He also might go, it's business. You got to sell tickets. I taught him well. I mean, honestly, he if it's good for business, he said it. Everything's on the table. I don't know where his head is at, and his head might be different today at his age and with what he's gone through the last couple of years and the stress and all that than where he was 2 years ago, and certainly 12 or 24 years ago. So, who's to say? But it didn't feel excessive or gratuitous. You don't want Vince to become a sympathetic figure, like where you're like, oh, we're kicking him when he's down or anything like that. But the fact is it fit the storyline, that Vince liked Seth and favored him, and Punk Vince, like, by the way, Punk and Vince were like, I joked about the Wordle scores. Vince and Punk texted each other. I mean, they were like pals. It's not like Punk wasn't a chosen one either. He just got burned out and frustrated. And, as we've learned, you can be friends with Punk and then you can not be friends with Punk, depending on how things go. So, I mean, it didn't come out of left field, Tej. It was natural to bring up that Punk's issues were with Vince, not with his colleagues. And I think it was good for him to say that.
Absolutely. And I think this is not the first time that Punk has alluded to Vince. I believe in the build to WrestleMania 40, when he was still on the shelf, he kind of needled Drew a little bit, like, oh, you were the chosen one. Who chose you? Who chose you? And Drew just had to like smile and say, like, oh, I can't say that. You got me there. But I was curious. To me, that felt more of a statement of WWE, we're giving these performers much more leeway than we did with the past. This is not the suffer and succotash era. We have enough trust in our performers that we can let them go to those places and they will keep it on track. And that to me was a much more pronounced statement of taking Raw off the air by saying these are two wrestlers that were allowed to speak from the heart, were allowed to go. I don't know exactly how kind of freewheeling they were allowed to be, but I'm assuming that not every word is scripted.
Yeah, quite a bit.
It definitely feels like, this is something that was written by CM Punk and Seth Rollins, not a team of writers.
Yeah.
And to me, that felt extremely powerful to go off the age of USA Network in a way that says, yeah, this is the quality of where we are. And you saw where we started. You saw the Suffer and Succotash promos. They were on USA too. And, we're not that anymore.
Yeah.
And, if aside from Vince's ego, you got to imagine there's a little bit of him just going, God damn it, that's good, pal. I'll put some butts in seats.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if Vince is rooting for his legacy to succeed or he's disconnected from it now and he hopes that everyone falls flat on their face. And I don't know. I don't know how petty or, who knows. Ken Arnold in the chat says they're finding ways to acknowledge Vince without actually saying his name. It's probably not as easy as it seems. Sadler version 3 says, do you guys think Vince cares about how he's been erased? He notoriously hated taking credit when it came to Hall of Fame speeches and things like that, and always had an on to the next mindset. That's why I don't know. I mean, there's reasons to believe both ways. That he's upset and hurt. And again, at his age, his opinion might be different than it was with, his what's come out about him. He might have a different attitude. It might be more fun when you're in a position of power to say anything goes. When you're making extra money, it's another thing when you're not making extra money and you're the punching bag. So yeah, it can go either way. All right. To another email here. Chris Johnson of Tyler, Texas says, first segment with New Day, Jay and Drew was good. We didn't talk much about that. New Day getting booed, Jay getting cheered, Drew being Drew. It was, paint by numbers, but I think you want to get New Day on TV. And I mean, Xavier looking at the crowd earnestly going, what did I do? What did I do? I can't get enough of that. What do you think?
I mean, I loved it, but at the same time, I came very, very close to saying, okay, we've done these segments a couple of weeks. Are we going to move on to something more substantial for New Day? And that's why I absolutely love that they tied them back in with, Rey Mysterio, because you want to ensure that New Day doesn't get a modicum of sympathy. Put them against Rey Mysterio, because everybody loves Rey Mysterio. Opening segment, I thought it was fine for what it was. It was a great way to kind of tie a couple of feuds together, which I'm always a big fan of. I never liked when, every kind of blood feud felt like it was off in its own little world. Because you got Jay, Drew, you got the new bloodline kind of working their way into a couple of very intriguing matchups getting teased for the future that could all start here. I think, Kofi and Xavier, they're doing great kind of playing the delusional heels who still think they're the baby faces, but I'm very curious to see how a heel New Day can really go in the ring if they're allowed to be as brutal as their new characters have been emotionally. So I thought this was a great tease for the future. And them putting down Latino World Order, absolutely hilarious. What was it? Mask guy, hat guy, and no hat guy? Yes.
Yep. Yeah, it was they're good. I mean, this is what I've been pining for. I've been wanting to see New Day as heels. Xavier's always been a heel in my eyes. Now what I want to bring out the trombone. I want fans just go completely crazy booing it. That's the moment I'm waiting for now. I want to be there for it. All right. The American-made promo is cheesy and not so good, trying hard to look tough, 80s and 90s vibes, and not in a good way. Yeah. I mean, the Creeds look like they're defined down. They're Taven and Bennett at this point. I know that's about as bad as it gets, Tej.
It is a shame because it felt like you could have really dug into the himbo personas that the Creeds have and tied that into the kind of jingoistic, like, yeah, America, hell yeah. But it feels like, they haven't been allowed to be a cohesive unit, more so just Chad Gable and friends. But the heel version this time, it just, I don't know. What makes it so frustrating for me is it's nothing inherently bad. It's just such a missed opportunity. It's a sum that's so much less than its parts.
Chris adds, I liked the Gable Otis match, but it feels like we should have settled this by now, and that match probably didn't settle it. I don't know. I mean, Otis tapped out. I guess there was interference leading up to it. It could have been I don't know. I mean, yeah, it seems like if Otis had made Gable tap out, how would you have felt about that? Like just, or pinned him in some other move? Like, would that have been just give the crowd a pleasing win, and after the match have the Creeds jump him and set up a tag match with Tozawa or something? I mean, like, should Gable have just lost?
I think Gable winning does Otis no favors. I think that Chad has been set up to lose often enough in 2024 that a loss against Otis wouldn't have hurt him at all. In any case, it probably would have furthered his character and just how delusional he's being. I'm curious to see how far this stretches out, because we did get a tease that American Made would be a product of the transfer window and potentially move to SmackDown. If that's the case, I'm very curious to see if they continue teaming with the Alpha Babe, or if they continue feuding with the Alpha Babes or not. Given how quickly WWE just kind of let this die after giving it consistent time, I'm skeptical that it'll get the attention it really needs if this continues to WrestleMania or beyond that. At this point, it just feels like there's enough of a sour taste in people's mouths that going back to this version of this conflict feels like it's just not going to resonate. I'd almost rather Gable and Otis advance and better and solidify their characters in 2025 before returning to this again, if they ever do.
Hopefully they just end up on separate brands, separate shows, through the
portal. Clean break. A clean break definitely feels like it's what it needs, which is a shame, but better to just kind of cut your losses and move on at this point with things like this.
Chris also says, I was hoping for some montages of both Raw and USA, and I liked the package. I skipped the War Raiders match to save time and the women's matches. I don't want to see Sheamus doing this. I don't know what I want to see him doing, but it isn't this. So we had Ludwig Kaiser. I'm A+, like A+ all the way or something, and European elegance. I think those are good, like, little catchphrases for him. I say, what is Seth freaking Rollins? Well, we know Ludwig Kaiser. He's European elegance. A+. What do you say? A+, not all the way, but whatever. A+ through and through. Something like that. That's what I'm talking about. Like, that is absolutely, they didn't lead with it. He earned that through his on-air persona. European elegance, A+ through and through. That's who he is. And they pegged it in these two little phrases. It doesn't mean he can't have more layers to him. But yeah, what do you think about him, and what do you think about Sheamus beating him up?
I mean, well, first off, led to another all-timer line from Mr. Tessitore. European elegance about to receive a European ass kicking when Sheamus came out. God bless that. They really are just kind of. He really is. I know he's not everybody's cup of tea if you grew up with the more exuberant, over-the-top dramatic announcers, but if you like a little bit more sports vibe, I guess, in your commentary, he does that kind of dry wit-esque commentary, just like, Jesse the Body Ventura.
One thing I really like about him, and I pushed for this for a long time, I always cited Mick Harsh as an example of this, old AWA announcer, and did a lot of indie shows in Minnesota. The most upset person in the room when a heel cheats should be the play-by-play guy. Like, not in a cartoonish way, but the play-by-play guy should be the most square, nerdy guy in the world who just wants to see who the better fighter is. And that means the referees should be respected, the rules should be followed, and when anything strays from that, now we're not getting settled what we came here for, which is to find out who the better wrestler is. That's why there's replays in the NBA and the NFL. People want to get the calls right now because you want to see the better team win. You don't want to see a ref call that's screwed up cost somebody. And he's good at that more than Cole. His instincts, I think I think it's not even how he's being, well, maybe it's how he's being produced, but because I can see Paul Levesque producing him that way too. He's, he experienced, Levesque has been a fan long enough to have experienced announcers let me put it this way, to understand that having announcers play the square, straight, follow the rules, we're here to see who wins, and champion that is an important ingredient to get heel heat. It's an important ingredient to at least pay lip service that some people care about presenting this as a sport. And of course it's pro wrestling. Of course you're going to stray from it, but you can't stray from something that doesn't exist. You're no longer straying from anything. You need to have that foundation, that core center, that there's people there who care. It doesn't matter. It's pro wrestling. It's not, oh, we're just here to have fun and entertain people and ha 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 and defend the heels because they're clever and resourceful. No, you got to have at the core foundation. It's a play-by-play guy. We're here to find out who the best wrestler is, and the rules are in place for a reason, just like in real sports. And he's doing that. And so, yeah, I'm impressed. I like a lot of what he's doing. And he softened the, I am Joe Tessitore and you are here watching, like the kind of Howard Cosell affections. It felt put on, and it tested my patience, and I was critical of it the first couple of weeks he's on the air, and he softened that. Now he feels more human. There's still a little bit, I mean, the smile is a little weird when they go to him on camera. Looks like he's posing for a still photo, not realizing, you're on live television. Anyway.
That's such an amazing way to put it, because you're right. That is spot on. He looks like someone posing for a photo who doesn't realize it's on video.
Yep.
No offense, Mr. Tessitore. Still a big fan. But going back to Sheamus and Kaiser, it is very much a bare bones feud. There's not really much to it beyond I hate you. But sometimes, especially in the age of, kind of long-term nuanced stories with, incredibly layered performances and long promos, sometimes an old slobber knocker, it's exactly what you need to kind of liven things up. And seeing Kaiser, who has like such an inherently smug face and persona, absolutely get laid out by an old school bruiser because patrician Sheamus, veteran Sheamus, this version of him embodies the kind of like working class lad who just wants to go have a pint. It's cathartic, especially in today's kind of society, where there's less sympathy for the mega rich than there ever has been. It's just so much fun seeing this guy with a stick up his ass just get absolutely destroyed over and over and over, while at the same time it's not burying Kaiser. They're building him up as a main event guy in his own right, which is incredible. And anyone who saw his work on the indies knows just how well he can be even as a babyface, which he hasn't really had an extended run as a babyface on the main roster. So I get if people think that it's the bathroom break segment right now, because there's not really a lot of meat on the bone, but that meat that there is, it's such a different rhythm. It keeps you, it allows you to kind of catch your breath, exercise a little bit of a different part of your brain for a couple of minutes before we get back to the long-term storytelling. And you need that. You need those kind of peaks and valleys to keep audiences invested. So that's my thoughts.
Yep. All right, let's talk about the women's tournament a little bit. We've touched on it, but Chris brings up, it seems weird that Lyra or Dakota will be the first IC champ, given what feels like a lack of focus on either of them for a bit. But it makes more sense than Io winning that belt. Yeah, how do you feel about where we are going into the finals? They announced it'll be the second Raw on Netflix in 2 weeks. They'll have the final match to determine the champion. We talked about match quality, and on-site correspondent talked about crowd reaction and that. But what do you think about how the tournament's turned out? And what do you think of the two choices we have?
Well, first off, I'm honestly just not a fan of it being on the second Raw on Netflix. I feel like, you're crowning a new champion. You're making a statement that the women's division's being treated with more legitimacy. You're crowning someone who can stand as the gatekeeper to the mid-card. I think that should have been either at the premiere of Raw on Netflix, or it should have been at Saturday night's main event on January 25th. I think that deserved a bigger platform than just a TV audience, despite how big that TV audience is right now. However, that being said, I like the options of Dakota and Lyra, because I've been noticing a pattern that Triple H is really kind of stacking his champions with veterans that have been here for a little while longer, and are finally getting their flowers versus kind of new up-and-comers that are being given a ball and taken and ran with it. Like for every Braun Breaker, you've got a Shinsuke Nakamura. For War Raiders, it's their first time, and they're relatively new on the main roster. You've got DIY that have been hustling in NXT and holding down a brand for a long time. So, you've got Chelsea Green, who is very kind of well-traveled and has done loads of work on the indies. And I know Dakota has for a little bit, but I don't think to that level, at least not to my knowledge. Her, not to mention Lyra, is a relatively new NXT call-up. She's on the younger side. I think that this is a great kind of counterbalance to what's going on in the SmackDown's mid-card. Could there be more exciting options just because of how over EO is? Sure. I think both of these women would do a great job taking the ball and running with it for our first reign. Yeah.
Going back to, I want to revisit this in 2 months. Let's see what they have in mind. I mean, it's a curious finals, but it's not like there was a lot of depth underneath the world title level to work with. But it didn't feel like that having this title on this show was something that they planned 6 months ago or 3 months ago, and we're kind of building a foundation for. So I think we have to, not give it a mulligan in a sense, or just sort of like wait and see. Let's see where they are in mid to late February and what they have in mind for it. It doesn't feel red hot right now, but this will be a case where, the belt makes the wrestler more than the wrestler makes the belt, probably. We'll see. Derek says the best Raw lead announcers have been Vince McMahon, Jim Ross, Michael Cole, and Joe Tessitore, where some other lead announcers struggle, like Joey Styles, Mike Adamle, Adnan Virk, and Jimmy Smith. I thought Jimmy Smith came around, but I think Tessitore's been better than him every week than Jimmy ever was, but I think Jimmy improved. Joey didn't work. He was the right person at the right time to work with Paul Heyman on those heavily scripted, post-produced shows where, his lines were kind of written for him. But other than that, he was kind of a one-note guy, oh my God, and whatever. Leaned on some stuff and it didn't work out. Yeah, Mike Adamle, that's, he just wasn't, there were things going on with him, where he wasn't able to be good. That was a bad call. They should have vetted that first. So yeah, Tessitore is top 4. Tessitore is top 4, Tej. I didn't know.
You're proud of that line, aren't you?
No. My enthusiasm might convey that, but I just sort of went with it because it was there. Okay. Chris said the final segment was as good as it gets for entering promos. So good, it'll be hard for the match to live up to the hype. Glad you're feeling better, Wade. I was feeling better like 4 hours ago. I'm like ready to lay down. Listen to me. I've sat in a chair and talked wrestling for a couple hours, and now I'm like looking for sympathy. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm just telling the truth. I'm ready to not talk for a little bit. Happy New Year to you and all the Torch community. Thank you, Chris. Tej, anything else you want to add before we sign off here?
I just want to say, continued appreciation for R-Truth being as over as he is. He's taken these very kind of throwaway comedy segments and means something. So for someone who, are you trying to distract me, Wade? I swear to God. So Al Larcher, I appreciate you. I appreciate you, my friend. Yeah. He said, good. Tej is the best co-host.
Yeah.
I want to read that because my ego will rise to dangerous levels. It's a big change from the last time I was on here and you put up all the comments talking about how I looked older than I was.
Last time people were talking about how good you were as an analyst too.
That was true. That was true.
Yeah. People thought you looked 26 instead of 23 and you were all up in arms and no one has sympathy for that.
Oh my God.
I don't even remember. It's something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. But, R-Truth taking these very kind of throwaway comedy segments and making them mean something just because of how lovable he is. Like, it's crazy to think that, Pete Dunne is essentially in a prolonged lower card feud simply because R-Truth cannot remember his name and he's being driven more and more crazy by it. And yet don't have widespread criticism that he's being buried. This is a waste of him. There's the kind of an acknowledgement that, all right, anyone who gets to work with Truth has a little bit of fun. They can make any kind of dynamic work. And, it's crazy just how much goodwill he's built up with the modern WWE audience. And when he retires, it will be a very, very sad day to call that out.
Well, on a ego inflating note, another great post show, Tej. So that's from Derek Mitchell. Thanks everyone for joining me. Thanks for putting up with my hoarse voice. I'm I'm gonna have some tea, and hope I can talk tomorrow. If not, hopefully I can talk by Wednesday night again. I just recorded. Well, I didn't do a lot of talking, but I recorded a like nearly 2-hour fix shortly before Raw too. So VIP members, check that out. That should have been posted while we've been doing the show. Tej, always fun talking with you. Thank you so much for taking your time out tonight to talk about the final Raw ever on USA, which is a bold statement. Netflix deals up. USA might outbid them. Who knows? But there might not be USA Network when this deal is over too. The way cable's going, who knows? But we know. I mean, you turn on Netflix and it's like there's Raw. It's like they're gonna bring this is big. This is like SmackDown on Fox. I think it's gonna create some new fans. So yeah, cool.
That's all I really got to say. Just want to say thank you guys again for having me, and to all the PWTorch fans in the chat and who could be listening to this anywhere else. Just hope you had a great holiday season. Merry whatever you celebrate, and hope you guys have a great new year.
Yeah. Happy New Year, everyone. Ken Arnold in the chat says Happy New Year, everyone. And be safe and enjoy it. And then, go Vikings. Oh, you know what I should do? Everyone's already stopped watching, but if you want to be a VIP member, it's going to be a fun year at the Torch. So much to talk about. PWTorch.com/govip. I'm out of practice. I don't know how to do plugs anymore, apparently. But you can get a 7-day free trial on Patreon. Search PWTorch VIP on Patreon or on Spotify, and you'll get a 7-day free trial of our VIP shows. Full information on all the options, including full VIP membership with access to our archives dating back to the late 1980s at PWTorch.com/govip. PWTorch.com/govip. If you enjoy our approach to covering wrestling and you want to hear more of it and not be left out of all the VIP exclusive content, this is the way to go. I did host the nearly 2-hour post AEW World's End pay-per-view roundtable on Saturday night. Rich Fan and Eric Kroll and I had a really good conversation on that pay-per-view and AEW in general. That is waiting for you if you go VIP. And as also noted, the fix where Todd gave some predictions on who will get called up from NXT and kind of the up and down AEW Dynamite experience and his review of ROH Final Battle and other stuff too. So yeah, check it out. Go VIP. Lots of good stuff. And our 18 years ago shows continue to be blasted out on our nostalgia history feed for VIP members with really fun content. We're moving into not so fun content in the year 2007 that we'll be covering. So you'll get to hear our coverage of things that happened in 2007. It's going to be quite the look back. But yeah, that's a big part of VIP membership too. So thanks everybody. And we'll talk to you next time. Happy New Year.